This is my 60 points of Soviet forces, and what you're looking at is a Soviet Afghanski battalion. Led right there by the battalion commander. I got 3 companies minus of Afghanski. Each of them have the anti-tank guided missiles and also the automatic grenade launchers in support. You got 2 units of Mi-24 Hind attack helicopters, 1 unit of 5 T-72s that will be coming in to save the Afghanski after they've secured the bridgehead, and lastly a BMP-1 recon platoon. So that is 1 formation of 60 points. The Americans are going tank heavy again. They are bringing 5 M1 Abrams, so that is the formation commander right there in the center, and then 2 small units of M1s in support. So we move towards the back. You have some ITVs, 3 M109 howitzers with an observer, 2 VADs, and then they're supported by a rather large platoon of American infantry. So a total of 7 bases there, along with the 4 requisite M113s. Prepare to face off against the Soviets in this epic clash of 60 points.
What is the location?
Tonight's mission will be fighting withdrawal with the Soviets on defense, Americans in the attack. The Soviets placed their first objective on this side of the river. As you can see, they've also placed their 2 minefields at the 2 main river crossings, leaving this third one deep within their lines, open to the Americans. The Americans have placed an objective here in the center and 1 at the crossroads on the left. So the Soviets deployed first, putting 1 infantry company here on the left. They're supported by this BMP-1 recon company in the woods. A 2nd Soviet company defends the 2nd objective with the headquarters element right there behind them, improving all of their scores. And then over here on the right, we got the 3rd company of Afghanski defending that objective. Off the board is 5 T-72s in ambush and 2 units of Hind helicopters that are loitering just off the table edge. The Americans counter-deployed and focused mostly on the middle. As you can see, we have 1 unit of M1s there. To their right, we have the VADs and also the observer right behind them. The M109s behind the woods there. The infantry company slightly to the left. There's the tank commander. On the other side of those trees, we have the 2nd unit of M1s, and then the ITVs over on the far left. The Americans, as the attacker, had the ability to choose what time of day they attacked. They, of course, chose night. The Soviets will be withdrawing their forces throughout the game and also lifting these objectives off as we go on. With that, the Americans will begin their first turn in this attack. The Americans have started their steady advance towards the Soviet forces. Over on the right, these ITVs moved at terrain dash all the way up to the edge of the cornfield. These M1 tanks moved at their tactical speed of 14 inches, and with their advanced stabilizers should be hitting on their normal to hits. Over here in the center, the tank commander, a little bit more wary, has positioned himself just behind that house, while the 113s with the infantry embarked have moved up between the 2 farmhouses. They're supported over on the left by that 2nd unit of M1 tanks, also moving forward at their tactical movement speed of 14 inches. The forward observer has moved up as well. He's trying to keep his distance, making sure he's not an easy target for any of those Soviet Unions with the anti-tank guided missiles. But he does need to get in range so he can call on fire from those 109s, while the VADs have moved up towards the center to provide the biggest umbrella he possibly can for all his forces, because he knows those Soviet Hinds are off the board, but they're going to be coming in soon. So we're in a good position to start the American attack against the Soviet lines. We'll go to the shooting next. The Americans open up their shooting phase with these self-propelled howitzers. Observing for themselves, they laid down a smoke screen here on the American left flank, really to protect first and foremost that American 113 observer. Then the big guns of the M1s opened up using their thermal imaging, which is a big boon for them, rolling 2 dice to see how far they can shoot. These 2 tanks opened up at the scouts back there, but needing 5s to hit because they were gone to ground and cover, didn't manage to convert anything. The tank commander, though, had some success shooting at this unit back here. He hit once. The Soviets failed their save, and of course the 2-up firepower check was successful, blasting one of those infantry squads out of their foxholes. But will it be enough? Lastly, these big guns also opened up, but unable to hit those BMP-1s back there in the woods. The 5s to hit was beguiling for the Americans. No love there, but they have advanced steadily and feel like they're in a good position to continue their attack. We'll see if the Soviets can respond. The Soviet commander has responded, and during his first turn, he has brought his Hinds in, who are loitering off the table. They are very cognizant of those VADs in the center, so they're looking to light up some M1s and maybe some ITVs over there on the American right. Everything else remained in place for the Soviets. They're not used to being on the defensive, so they're playing it very cautiously and trying to make sure that the Americans have to come to them and take as much time as they can get so they can start withdrawing some of these units. The Soviet commander also ordered his T-72 tank company to stay in ambush. Would like the Americans to close a little bit farther with those M1s. With the deployment zone of the Soviets being halfway up the board and being able to deploy anywhere in my deployment zone, those American tanks cross that line. It's going to be an easy opportunity for Soviet T-72s to start getting side armor shots on those American M1s, where they are much more vulnerable than in the front. In their turn 1 shooting phase, the Soviets opened up with their considerable firepower on the American lines. I started off with this unit of Hinds. They didn't have to roll to see. The Americans did roll to shoot their anti-aircraft and were able to see the Hinds, hitting once, but the Hind made his save. In return, one of the Hinds hit the Americans, penetrated the armor, but only managed to bail them out, rolling a 2 for the firepower check. Then I moved over to this unit of Hinds. They rolled to see because they went to shoot those ITVs. After the ITVs, also managed to see the Hinds. Shot their anti-aircraft fire, hit twice, and the Hinds failed both of their saves, but the 5-up firepower check on the 50 cal was wanting, so those Hinds survive. They did not manage to hit the Americans, though, needing 5s because of the nighttime. The low terrain didn't hurt their ability to shoot because they're flying nice and high. And then we saw a series of good dice rolls, starting with this unit over here. They managed to roll a 6 on their 2 dice to see the Americans. Didn't do any damage, and neither did these BMP-1s. This BMP-1 actually on the right, with the 24-inch range, having rolled a 6 on his night vision as well, managed to pick out the American observer and hit him. The American observer, because he's an independent unit, was then able to switch that wound, swap it with that M1 tank. The M1 just had to roll a 2 or better for that little spigot missile to bounce off the front, but instead he rolled a 1. Thankfully, the Soviets rolled a 2 for firepower, and he's only bailed out as well. Here, though, is where it really started to happen with this anti-tank guided missile team destroying one of that American 113 in the back there. The 2 units got out, no problems. But then the 3rd unit of anti-tank guided missiles had a line of sight to shoot at the headquarters just within 24 inches. Once again, rolling a 6 on his ability to see. Very useful. They don't have night vision, but they sometimes do roll pretty well on that 1d6. Managed to hit the American commander 113, his track, and he did not survive that. He died trying to get out of his track. So they destroyed 2 of those 113s and are going to force 2 morale checks on the Americans. So we're going to go roll those for the Americans, and hopefully the Americans stick around. Otherwise, it could be a real short game. That was very unlucky for the Americans, folks, as they tossed a thermite grenade into that M1 while his buddy scampered off the board into the night. Same thing happened here. The 4+ morale check failed on both occasions. They have just lost 4 M1 tanks. A total of 32 of their 60 points. It's going to be very difficult now for the Americans to win this game, but they're going to try. The American commander is horrified with what he sees before him. Those Hinds have done a number on his tanks, scaring these off the board after just knocking one crew out for a turn, and then probably putting the fear into this crew as well, causing both of them to flee. He has attached to himself to those two squads right there who had been blown out of their transport, and they managed to pass their morale check, and they are no longer pinned down, thankfully. But he is in a tough position, so we will see what the Americans can do. Most troublesome of all for our tank commander on the American side is he still doesn't know where those 5 T-72s are, and they can put a pounding on what's left of the American forces. So he's going to have to be very careful at this point if the Americans are going to be victorious. In the American movement phase, he's ordered his VADs up to engage those Hinds over on his right flank, while the American infantry have popped out of their 113s, 2 squads moving into this farmhouse on the right, with the 4 squads on the left into that farmhouse, taking up positions to start firing, plunging fire into the Soviet forces, hopefully get some of those units off the ground so they can advance and maybe take an objective and still pull this game out. So now on to the shooting phase. The Americans have responded in a big way, starting with their artillery fire. Managed to use the observer to range in right there. Did a number of hits, unfortunately didn't kill any of the Soviets, but have managed to pin them down now, which is a start. These VADs right here fired on the unit of Hinds that was right there and destroyed both of them, while these ITVs managed to destroy one of the 2 Hinds there. The second Hind failed his morale check and has left the battlefield. So at least the American commander doesn't have to worry about that anymore. As far as other shooting, he failed to hit both shots with his main gun. The Americans in both of the farmhouses shot down, plunging fire into that company minus of Afghanski. Didn't do anything. But the 50 cal machine guns did manage to ferret out one of the squads that was back there holding the objective. So when in roundup, 4 Soviet Hinds are now off the board, and 1 Soviet RPG team has been destroyed. Will it be enough for the Americans? We'll have to see. We go on to Soviet turn 2. Soviet turn 2 in their movement phase, they are content to hold what they got, not moving anybody across the line in their defensive positions. The foxholes have been key in providing the Soviets some survivability against the American onslaught, and the T-72 tanks remain in hiding to see where the Americans are going to make their push, to see what objective they're going to try to get. Looks like it's going to be on the Soviet left, but the Soviet commander feels he has some time and will keep those T-72s and their big guns right where they're at, and that's in hiding. So on to the Soviet shooting phase. The Soviets opened fire in their turn 2 shooting phase, but the night was really playing havoc with their ability to hit targets. Starting out over here on the left, we opened up with the 3 missiles into those ITVs hiding in the cornfield. Needing 6s to hit because of night and they're in cover. Didn't manage to hit at all, unfortunately. And then the automatic grenade launcher and a couple of RPGs opened up into the units in the farmhouse. These BMP-1s opened up also in the ITVs, but again, needing 6s, weren't having any luck. While this unit here also managed to shoot some RPGs into the farmhouse. It was, in the end, an RPG 18 managed to take out one of the Dragon teams, making his 5-up firepower check after the Americans failed their save. So at least 1 American dead. In total, with the automatic grenade launchers and the RPGs doing a total of 4 hits, not enough to pin the Americans, so they're going to be shooting just fine when it comes to their turn. Over on the right, finally, one of the anti-tank guided missile teams managed to score a hit and bailed out one of the VADs. Those are going to be a problem if I can't take care of them, because they have so many shots against my infantry. It could get ugly. Now the Americans do have to make a morale check over there. They're going to have to decide whether or not the American commander is going to attach to that unit for a 3-up or let it ride with a 4-up. They are dangerously close to being out of formation morale, in formation good order, so they might not want to lose their commander. We'll see what they do. The Americans, deciding that they were already pressed in this attack and things were not going well, decide to attach their commander to those VADs. Unfortunately, they rolled a 1, so that means that both those VADs are going away and the American commander is going away. They just have 5 infantry left, along with some ITVs in their corps. It's going to get ugly very quickly. The Soviets didn't do much damage again to the Americans, but the American morale, being their Achilles heel, has once again reared its ugly head, and they'll be losing quite a bit of more units.
That's a direct order. Do it now.
The Americans find themselves leaderless at the start of turn 3. Fortunately, their formation is still in good order. They still have the infantry squads there for the time being. But being leaderless, they've decided to hold in place right now to see if they can continue to throw some damage against these Soviet forces, which are well dug in a hope that they can have some really good luck and force the Soviets off of one of these objectives maybe. The Soviets will have to start redeploying units here shortly, and that's what the Americans have got to hope for, understanding that that objective is probably out of reach. So we'll be back after the American shooting turn. The American artillery has opened up with their 155mm guns and have done a number on the Soviet infantry in this wood line, taking out the AT-4 Spigot missile teams that were in there, and also another large base unit commanders now jump back there. They are again pinned. Fortunately, the formation commander's back there. He'll be rallying them again on a 2-up. While the American infantry, a bunch of sharpshooters with the 50 caliber machine guns, and also the saws here. Unfortunately, the Dragons didn't do much damage, but 13 hits, only converted to 1 dead Soviet base though, but they are also gone to ground. Of course, with the Afghanski rules, they will get unpinned on a 3-up, so we'll do that to begin the Soviet phase. Overall, still looking desperate for the Americans, but they do feel pretty good about that round of shooting, and they're going to give it another try to suffer through another round of Soviet retaliation before they make a move. So on to Soviet turn 3.
Launcher, citadel.
So at the start of Soviet turn 3, they have withdrawn the infantry company that was over here on the right flank, feeling very little threat from the Americans there. I've got 5 units on the board, which meant I have to withdraw 1. The vaunted Afghanski infantry, though, failed to rally here. They needed a 2-up, so they are still gone to ground. These guys needed 3-up. They failed as well. They are also gone to ground, so troublesome. The Soviets have sprung their ambush, though, with this tank unit out of line of sight. That means they can be up to 4 inches away from the Americans. They have their sight set on that observer controller, because those copperheads will remain dangerous to them as long as that observer controller can call in fires. But I feel like if I can take out that, the game will be in firm Soviet control. So on to the Soviet movement phase next. Soviet tank commander has split his forces to the left and right of the trees to get the maximum number of shots. I know that endangers them for morale checks, but I think that's the right move at this point. Need to kill that observer controller. That's the commander right back there. Everything else remained in line. The other thing that really makes the Soviet commander nervous are those ITVs. We're going to give it another go with the spigots and the spandrels back here to see if we can't destroy them. So, on to Soviet turn 2 shooting. The big red machine continues to roll on with these T-72 tanks needing a combination of 5s for the right and 6s for the left, as line of sight was partially blocked by that destroyed M1. Managed to land 2 hits on the poor observer controller. He didn't stand a chance. Both firepower checks were good. While the BMP-1 scout platoon finally came through, hitting one of the ITVs and blowing it up, making us 3+ firepower check. His buddy, like all the Americans so far, not really committed to this attack, to include the commander, took off as soon as his wingman was killed. That leaves the Americans with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infantry bases, 2 113s, and those M109s in the back. So really no chance at all for the Americans to win this. They're going to give up now and retire with the rest of their forces and try to restack and come back at the Soviets again. So I hope you enjoyed the game. Afghanski is probably my favorite Soviet force to play with. I think that the anti-tank guided missile teams really add a lot of punch to the Soviets, especially against some of those light targets. T-72s remain problematic for Soviet players, and it's not getting any better for us, unfortunately. But with the use of the ambush rule, you can really use them to your advantage. So I felt like they did pretty well tonight. And then, of course, the BMP 1s and 2s are both pretty ace. On the American side, just poor morale rolls from the get-go, losing 24 points of American tanks just to morale rolls. And that was, didn't even destroy an M1, just bailed out 2 of them, and then all 5 have left the board. So that's the way it rolls with the Americans. So Soviet victory. Hope you enjoyed the game.